Sarah. Welcome to the presentation of the 7th Annual Women's Rights Prize, honoring courageous individuals and groups who have made significant contributions to human rights that advance the rights of women and girls around the world. We are grateful to all of those who have made it possible for us to be here at the Reichhold Center for the Arts today. To the Governor, the First Lady, President Jeffrey Hall, the staff at UBI and the Reichhold, staff at the Gruber Foundation. As you might imagine, we could never hold an event like this without the support and work of a number of both seen and unseen hands, and we thank them. We are here to honor the amazing achievements of Lema Bowie and the Women's Legal Center. Before presenting them with the prize, we will hear from them, as well as from distinguished local participants, during the panel discussion that is called Gender-Based Violence, the Family and Society. Now let me invite our panel co-moderators to join me on the stage, both of whom are advisors to the Women's Rights Prize. They sit on the selection committee that selects the recipients each year. It is my great pleasure to present Sakiko Fukudapar, Professor of International Affairs at the New School in New York City. She is a development economist working in the areas of human rights and poverty, conflict prevention, and global technology. She is also on the board of several NGOs advocating for human rights and technology for development. From 1995 to 2004, she was the lead author and director of the UNDP Human Development Reports. She founded the Journal of Human Development and is on the editorial board of Feminist Economics. Professor Fukudapar holds academic degrees from Cambridge University, the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and the University of Sussex. Our second moderator is Thandabantu Nhlapo, Deputy Vice Chancellor at the University of Cape Town. A former Deputy Ambassador of South Africa to the United States, he was appointed by President Mandela to serve on the South African Law Commission. As chair of the Project Committee on Customary Law, Professor Nhlapo was instrumental in the passage of significant legislation in family law and in the empowerment of women and children, including securing legal recognition for marriages concluded under Indigenous law. He is the author of 2 books and has written and spoken extensively on issues of women's rights in family law and of cultural diversity under the South African Constitution. Professor Nhlapo. Now let me ask our recipients, Ms. Lema Bowie and Women's Legal Center trustees Tiboko Molabatsi and Allison Tilley, please also join us on stage. Thank you. I will now turn the program over to our moderators.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pat. The proceedings will be organized in the following way. We will first hear from the 2 award recipients. Each will present their work, and then we will have a discussion, including some questions from the audience if we have time. And then we will have a second portion of this discussion, this ceremony, and we will have a panel discussion that will include 3 judges from Virgin Islands. We will be introducing them later at in that portion of the proceedings take place. Now, it is my pleasure to invite Devogo Molevazzi and Alison Kelly to speak about the work of the Women's Legal Center.
Thank you. The Women's Legal Center was founded in 1998 as a result of looking at the implementation of our Section 9 of the Equality Clause in our newly established Constitution. The Women's Legal Center is a non-profit, independently funded law center. Our primary goal is to further women's equality in South Africa, with particular attention to the rights of the socially and economically disadvantaged women. The Women's Legal Center has a vision of women in South Africa living free from violence, in safe housing, free to own their own share of property, empowered to ensure their own reproductive and health rights, and able to work in a safe and equal environment. We seek to achieve our goals through litigation, and we also approach a parallel strategy of advocacy and training. We work in 5 key areas, strategic areas, and perhaps I think today we'll just focus on just 1 or 2 of them. But one is freedom from violence. We take up cases that improve the access of women and girl children to state protection from gender-based violence, particularly rape and domestic violence, and increase protection of girl children from abuse in schools. We also take up cases, and perhaps our larger pool is relating to fair access to resources in marriage and partnerships. We take up cases to ensure that women receive a fair share of the matrimonial estate and assets of partnerships when they're dissolved, whether by death or separation. This involves ensuring that all partnerships are legally recognized, irrespective of religion and custom. This will include all customary law marriages, polygamous marriages. In South Africa, we recognize polygamous marriages. So a man can have more than one wife. We don't know many women can have more than one husband. So perhaps, let's say, a man can have more than is recognized for the man to have more than one wife, and thus the law has been introduced to protect all the other spouses, the second or the third or the fourth wife. We also look at access to housing and land. We take up cases that extend tenure to women in their own rights, to prevent loss of tenure on the dissolution of marriages and partnerships. And this would relate to cases where the children, perhaps, I will speak a little bit about it, which is one of the cases, where children may inherit even if their parents are not legally married, or may inherit, or where spouses whose marriages are not recognized may still inherit in terms of interstate succession law, which is when we don't have a will, when you have been written up a will. We also take up cases to fair labor practices, which extend employment protections to vulnerable groups. Vulnerable groups are women working on farms, sometimes sex workers, etc. And we also try to develop the law on sexual harassment in the workplace in relation to domestic workers and just workers in general. And access to healthcare is an important component of our work. We defend legal challenges to the right to make choices around reproductive health and litigate to ensure that women have access to reproductive health care. We take cases related to women's access to health care and intersection between HIV/AIDS and our other strategic focus areas. At the Women's Legal Center, we offer free legal advice to women, either assisting them ourselves or referring them to the relevant body or other NGOs or even the state in whatever areas focus area. We provide legal opinions, draft and make submissions to Parliament, often at the invitation of the state. And we present workshops and draft legislation, regulations, and policies. We also provide training to ensure gains won in cases are communicated and implemented and help to recover our costs. It's very important to the center that after we take up our litigation, that we communicate whatever results so that it's implemented on the ground to those communities on which we're acting upon. And we also provide, as I mentioned, information and training and do capacity building regionally on the continent. Perhaps I'll look at just one case in particular in our recent successes. It's the Bear case. Provides an interesting study on how the constitutional rights of women and girl children intersect with customary law. The South African Constitution incorporates customary law into South African law to the extent that it is consistent with the Bill of Rights. The courts are empowered to develop the customary law in line with the Constitution, and where this cannot be done, to declare customs that conflict with the Bill of Rights unconstitutional. In the case of Mrs. Bear, she had two daughters, aged 2 and 9, who could not inherit from their father's property because they were female. Mrs. Bear could not, the property was the girls' home in Khayelitsha, which is on the outskirts, township on the outskirts of Cape Town, where they'd been living with both their parents. Since their parents were not married, the mother had no legal claim to the house. And because, of course, of the patriarchal nature of customary law, the children could not inherit. Thus, the house was given to the girl's grandfather, who decided to sell it to defray funeral expenses. This was in the early 2000s, we still had an old act called the Black Administration Act of 1927, which is really apartheid legislation. And in terms of that particular provision, Section 23 provided that daughters could not inherit their father's estate if he died intestate without a will. And of course, the African customary law of patriarchy dictates that only a male who's related to the deceased can qualify as an intestate heir, and looks at the eldest male descendant of the deceased first. In this instance, it was the girl's grandfather who did not have the girl's interests at heart. The matter appeared in the Constitutional Court, and in 2004, the Constitutional Court confirmed that South African customary law relating to interstate succession are unconstitutional and discriminatory. The court also confirmed that the entire statutory scheme governing deceased estates of black persons is unconstitutional. Therefore, the Black Administration Act would no longer apply, as it discriminates on the basis of race, birth, and gender. In essence, I think that this decision means that women and girl children, illegitimate children, and children other than the oldest male can inherit from their parents' estate, regardless of the nature of their parents' relationship. It also brings an end to discrimination against these groups on the basis of sex, race, gender, social origin, and birth. In 2009, about some 5 years after the judgment, the legislature passed the Reform of Customary Succession Act, which regulates the rules of succession and customary law and aligns with the requirements set up by the Constitutional Court in the Bear case. So I think that this sort of ties up. This is a good example of how we use how the use of the rights-based approach and impact litigation can amend laws and policies for the benefit of women and girl children, particularly when there is a conflict with custom. I think that perhaps just for you to understand the context in which our center operates, I should just tell you a little bit about our country so that you can understand how the context in which we operate, rather than just tell you more about our cases. South Africa has the widest disparity in income between rich and poor in the world. We compete with Brazil. We're neck and neck. Approximately half of all South Africans are living beyond the poverty line. Poverty and inequality in South Africa are characterized by race and gender and class, with per capita income of black households of 13% that of whites. It's estimated that 60% of black South Africans remain poor and live in deteriorating socioeconomic conditions. According to the South African government, the majority of the poor are disproportionately women. The poorest households in South Africa are female-headed, and the highest percentage of these are rural women-headed households. According to the 2006 household survey, more women than men are unemployed, and black African women have the highest unemployment rate. When women are employed, they earn less than men do. Women generally worked in highly vulnerable jobs such as domestic, casual, seasonal, or sex work industry.